I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Joanne O'Riordan and Ciara O'Sullivan. We're here to talk about inclusivity and diversity in sport. You're very welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I've spoken to some people today and the GAA became a part of their life at some point in their childhood, or they were introduced to it. By the sounds of what I know about both of you, it was in your lives very prominently from day one. That's right?
Yeah, definitely. I know for me anyways, growing up, my siblings were always involved. I was born 24th of April 1996. My parents knew I was not going to have any limbs. And about a week after I was born, they took me to my brother's under-14 county final. And everyone wanted to look at the girl with no limbs in the buggy. And my mother was like, but my son is playing. Yeah, I've just been involved really since birth, you know, between following my siblings, wanting to be a writer and everything on top of it. So yeah, it's kind of, can't get away from it really.
There's been no part of your life where the GAA wasn't a feature?
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
And even I was kind of thinking, like before this, I actually moved to England for an Erasmus program for a year abroad. And I remember it was September and the clubs were playing. And I actually rang my dad. I was like, oh, will you video call me? And my dad's like 60 odd. So he was like, what? I was like, I just want to see the game. Like, and he was like, are you lonely? And I was like, no, I'm fine.
Of course
I'm fine. It's totally fine. And that was the only time. And I actually felt very like left out and excluded. It was really weird.
Same for you?
Yeah, I think I kind of had no option but to like GAA and get involved because both my parents played. My mother was chairperson of the ladies football club at home. My dad coached every team I'd say that ever played with our club. So yeah, I have three sisters, and from the minute we were old enough to walk, we were sent to the pitch, football from a very young age. And since then, it's been a massive part of my life. And I can't really imagine a time when it won't be. I think even when I do retire, you know, I'd like to stay involved some other way. So yeah, like Joanne, it was right from the start and have enjoyed it since.
How much of your personality is shaped by the experiences you've had in the GAA?
I think, like, I know it probably sounds a bit sad, but like, I think the GAA or football is kind of who I am in terms of, like, if I meet someone, the first thing they'll always say or ask about is football, you know, oh, you did a good win, or you did, it's like I would be known at home as being obsessed with football and GAA in general, so yeah. That's
your whole identity?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
You've 8 All-Ireland.
Yeah.
And I always imagined if I sat opposite someone who had 8 All-Irelands, it would be that I would be speaking to them about. But I want to speak to you about, where is women's sport at the moment? Like, you've a lot of experience, you've travelled a lot of road. Where are we now compared to where we used to be? Where are we now compared to where we want to be?
I think women's sport is in a really good position, and I'm fortunate enough to have played with Cork ladies for this is my 14th year. So right back in 2008, I suppose, like, I think the young girls coming on now don't know how good we have it compared to, you know, what we had. And
what was it like 2008?
2008, you couldn't get a pitch to play a match because the lads were training, and it didn't matter if it was an underage boys team, a men's team, and once it was a male team, we were struggling to get pitches to play possibly a championship game because lads were training. And now we're playing in Páirc Uí Chaoimh in Croke Park, and it's the norm. So like, that was kind of unthinkable, I suppose, you know, 14 years ago or whatever before that. So I think it's come so far. Before, you know, someone would say that was a great match for a ladies' match, and now it's just a great match. It's not for a ladies' match. So, you know, you'd be used to comments like that, or, oh, how often do you train? And then you'd say, you know, whatever we do, or what our week looks like, and people would say, oh God, you do train as much as the lads. And you're like, yeah, we've been saying that for years, like, but people are starting to realise, you know, that we do put in as much as the men, and we do sacrifice as much. And I think women's sport is in such a good place now compared to 10, 15 years ago. And obviously there's still work to be done. I think the ideal situation is we're not looking at it as women's sport, it's just sport.
Putting your journalist hat on, what would your answer to that be?
Yeah, look, I suppose from my perspective, like when I joined the Irish Times 2017, it was for the Women in Sports page. And I suppose 2017 was a time where you could tell something was happening, but you didn't know which way it was going to possibly go. And I actually vividly remember telling Malachy Logan, oh, it's grand, like, you'll have me doing men's Champions League finals, right? And he was like, no, you're women's sports. And I was like, oh. And my brothers were a bit disappointed because they were like, you're not going to go see like Lionel Messi, like, and all these players. And I was like, no. And it's gas now, like 4 years writing the column. I'd never want anyone to take it off me. Like, I love seeing it grow. And I suppose from my perspective, given the campaigning that I would have done for people with disabilities, I can see the exact same stuff that women in sport are asking for, the same as people with disabilities are asking for. It's access to pitches, it's access to training, it's respect, it's not going up to someone being like, geez, you know, it's great you're doing that because you've no limbs. The same way Ciara is saying, it's great you're doing that because you're a woman. Like, we all want to do the same thing. We all want to be an equal part of society. And I think sport somehow, because it's a microcosm of society, because it's so reactive rather than passive, it helps you to do that because it's a win at all costs. And obviously there's issues with that as well, but from a journalist perspective, I've seen it grow so much. And, you know, in a way, everyone's like, oh, you should be proud of the work you've done, but it's not me, it's the role models on the pitch. You know, I'm very fortunate that I'm in a position to tell these incredible stories, so why wouldn't I want to, you know? And as I said, if someone was to call me tomorrow and was like, you're doing a Champions League final, men or women's, I'd say, sign me up for the women's, I prefer it, definitely.
Is it tedious kind of having to answer the same kind of questions, like compare women's sport to men's sport, compare where we are today to where we used to be?
It can be, but I think it's necessary, and I have no problem doing it if it means us getting to the stage where we don't have to.
Right.
So yeah, and like 10 years ago you weren't being asked that because they weren't even thought of in the same league. So even to be being asked that is progression. And as I said, in 10 years' time, hopefully there won't be questions like that because it will just be all the one. I think anything you can do to help and to make it normal that women and men are treated the same in sport, I'm happy to do it. So I wouldn't find it tedious, and I do see it as part of the progression that inevitably we won't be asked those questions.
So you're noticing difference is in how people phrase their opinions and the kinds of questions sometimes they ask?
Yeah.
Do you imagine a scenario in the future where there will be no difference?
I do. I really do like to see the progression in the last, as I said, I can only talk of from an inter-county perspective in 14 years, but the progression in that 14 years, like, it was just unthinkable. The exposure in media in terms of being able to watch matches, to read about them in the paper, to read about them in social media, I think we're going really much so in the right direction. And I think the profile of women in sport, because, you know, the likes of Joanne and all that who are promoting it, I think it's phenomenal at the moment. And I think it is going to keep improving, but I do think we've probably 5-10 years of work to do to get it to a level playing field.
Would you agree?
Yeah, even the last 4 years of me writing, I remember I'd have to write I used to call them nice fluffy pieces about, like, you know, how great the players are, they're inspirational.
It's colour pieces.
You know, you know, and I think it is important to give it that same care of level attention to detail and everything. You know, if I'm interviewing a ladies footballer tomorrow morning, I'm giving it the same attention that if I was giving, you know, anyone else. And I think that's just the respect that they are owed because of, like, basically we've just ignored them for so long. And I think the jump has actually been so radical. Like, it's gone from, you know, barely, as Ciara was saying, nothing, to actually something that's like a big tip of the iceberg, you know, to something that could be incredible. And I think, you know, whatever about me, there's a lot of people who've been rowing this boat for a long time, and there's a lot of people who are on the train, and whether people are like it or not, the train is leaving in women's sports is going to be a big thing, I think, in the future.
The phrase we spoke a moment ago, that women need to support women more. Talk about that.
Yeah, it's something that actually Eamon Ryan, our Cork manager, years ago used to always say it, because, you know, we used to be giving out that there was no crowds at our matches and that we weren't getting supported or whatever. And Eamon used to always say women need to support women. And he used to always reference, like, the amount of women who would go to a Cork hurling match, would go to a Cork men's football match, and that those same women weren't going to ladies football or camogie and weren't bringing their children to ladies football or camogie matches. And I think that is really important, because while, as I said, the attendances have grown massively. If you look at an All-Ireland final, 50,000 probably for ladies football, which is unbelievable. If you go to a semi-final, you could have a few hundred. And I think that's the next step in terms of talking about ladies football specifically, in terms of getting the support there, because they've done phenomenal work in getting attendances at finals. And then it's just so different to go to a semi-final, have your parents, a few hundred people. So I think women do need to support women. I think women need to bring their kids to women's matches, and to just make it from such a young age for kids that it's the norm, that it's, you know, you go to the men's match if the men are playing, and you go to the women's matches if the women's are playing, and why wouldn't you go to both? So I do think that's an important part of it, women supporting women.
Do you think that message is getting out?
I do. I think it's taking longer. It does tend to be still mainly men saying you had a good win, you had a bad loss, whatever. It is way more men that maybe have an interest in sport in general, I'm not sure, but definitely in ladies football, or from what I'm noticing, it is more men that are still supporting it. So I do think there's more work needed on that. And I think it starts in places like the schools of young girls wanting to be brought to matches and insisting that they are brought to matches. So there is still a bit of work to do there, because I do still think men that support it more than women.
You're nodding away there.
Yeah, like definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, statistically, even we would have seen that more men are into sport, and that's totally fine. You know, and I think there is like the gap even now, like my brother Denny, he's got 2 small girls, and he'd say the same. He'd happily watch a ladies football match. It's not just for them. He's like, the football's just better. Like, and I think that's something as well that, as Ciara said, we have to make sure like that if all these people are coming, they're coming as like a family, they're coming as a collective unit, because not only are you going to grab the current fans who are already existing, you're going to grab these future fans who are going to grow up and be able to see all these, you know, amazing women, you know, playing their game like Ciara, and something to aspire and look up to. I suppose in Cork, like when I was younger, definitely we were fortunate to have like the young team. You know, I would have, you know, grown up with the 10 in a row All-Irelands, you know, so on and so forth, and watching Ciara as well. So, you know, women's sport was kind of always there in Cork, but yet at the same time, we always kind of felt they never got their right. You know, like it was only when they got voted Team of the Year in 40, I think a couple of years ago, I think everyone was like, oh my God, they've made it.
Yeah,
like in a weird way. And like, could you imagine telling someone who's got 10 All-Irelands, you haven't made it until you've won a fan voted award? Like, it doesn't make sense. But yeah, no, I think it's just about getting, as Ciara said, the consistency of the fans. And I even noticed that as well. Like, you go to a semi-final and there's the parents and the same Joes you'll meet all the time, and then you go to an All-Ireland final, there's loads of people, and I think it's just nabbing those fans to keep coming consistently and to build a foundation and a core base of fans more than anything.
Role models are important, I think, to drive any kind of a change. Like, what's it like being a role model? Do you carry that burden, do you carry that very lightly? Is it a big responsibility?
God, I don't know. See, I don't see myself as a role model. Like, I had Juliette Murphy and them as role models, but when you're playing in the middle of it, I don't know if you would see yourself as a role model. I suppose the one thing I would be conscious of is with my own club at home, going down to the pitch, you know, helping out with training if I can, and you know, my dad and my sisters are involved and with coaching underage, and they'd say, oh, a Cork player is coming down now. Obviously they get very disappointed when they realise it's me, but like, I would be conscious of trying to give back a bit to the club at home and to the young girls at home, and like, yeah, a role model, I don't see myself.
God, it doesn't sit well with you at
No,
all, does it, that term?
I do not see. No, that's Juliette Murphy, like Valerie Mulcahy, all those girls from that great team. So yeah, not me.
No.
No.
The importance of feeling included and feeling a part of, I think, has been a theme of a lot of the conversations I've had today. And sport can provide that, and the GAA particularly can provide that. What can we do more in this area?
I think it's a hard one, because I think only when you're part of a team and a really close-knit team and a community do you realise the value of it and the importance of it. So it's trying to get people into that, you know, trying to get people to play from from a young age, because I think what sports give you is invaluable in terms of everything in life, how to deal with losses, how to celebrate wins, how to be gracious in defeat, or, you know, I just think there's so much from sport, and to try and get everyone included. And I think it's really important to, you know, we came from a stage where women were making the sandwiches or they were washing the jerseys, and now to making women realise that there's a part to play in coaching if you're interested in coaching, you know, in admin if that is what you're interested in. But I think, again, it's all from doing it from a young age and making it normal that if you're a woman and you want to coach the men's club team, that's a possibility for you. And I think that would be great to see. Like, even we're seeing how much we've progressed in any of the intercounty teams that I know of in terms of Cork, Dublin, Galway. All the managers are all male. And if you look at Cork, we've come from a place where we've people who've won 10 All-Irelands, 10, 11 All-Irelands. And, you know, we need to start getting those people back involved in coaching, because while it's great to have the unbelievable coaches we have, we need to have those role models in coaching roles as well. Because there'll be some people who'll never play or never be able to play or want to play, but to let them know that there is still a role in some other capacity, I think is really important.
Yeah, definitely. I just echo everything Ciara said. Like, I mean, I'm obviously not a player. I don't look like a player, and that's totally fine by me. And I remember when I was younger, there was this always awkwardness because all my 4 other siblings would have played, and it's very obvious Joanne isn't going to play and continue on the legacy of the O'Riordans or whatever it was, as terrible and all as we are.
There was an awkwardness.
Yeah, just people were just like, oh, what will we do with her? You know, like, you don't want to give her like water girl because like that's a bit low grade for her. And I was happy out to be water girl. And I think it was only when I was at a junior B ladies football match with my dad. I was about 5 years old. My dad got called in to do linesman. My dad was like, oh my God, like this is my worst nightmare. And then he was like, oh, I have to be with Joanne. You know, I can't leave her by herself. And then I was like, Dad was like, no, do it. Like, take me. And then Dad was like, how am I going to take you? And I sat inside his jacket and he zipped it up and he was running up and down the line with me and I was calling, oh, your ball. Yeah, your ball. I was living my best life. And I think really it was only because they saw my parents being so open with me and not caring that I couldn't play, that they were like, okay, there's probably a different role for her. And I suppose really it's just to make it a bit more accessible. You know, if you're going to talk to someone, say, with a disability, just ask them what it is they want, because they know they can't play. So there's no point in like forcing it. Obviously, Jor in the GA is doing incredible work, the Diversity and Inclusion Officer with wheelchair hurling and football for all. But when I was around 10 years old, like football for all was everyone kind of tiptoed around you and was like, oh, they have a disability, don't say boo to them. When I was 10, I gave out to a paralysed kid for leaving in 4 goals. You know, and my parents were like, oh, she's done. That's her career anyways, out the door. And they were right. But, you know, they were like, I suppose really I just came from a place of like competitiveness and like not even like a desire to win, but just I wasn't happy with the way we were being treated. And I actually realised that those reasons why I got kicked off the powered shared soccer team are the reasons why I've done things that I've done today. And I think people like tend to like shy away from that. If you have a disability, you can have a personality and be a bit psychopathic on the field.
I get that. I think there is sometimes a fear or a discomfort around a lot of these conversations, particularly when something like a disability is discussed with somebody who has a disability. You're thinking, what should I say? Are there terms that are offensive? Will I, in a really clunky, inappropriate, insensitive way, ask certain questions? I think that's something I'm sure you're really familiar with.
It tends to be like, and you know, there's definitely things, you know, that I don't like being done to me, but I smile and nod, you know, because I'm like, at the end of the day, this is probably their first interaction with someone with no limbs. Like, I mean, there's only 7 of us that exist in the world. Like, I can't beat you down, like, if you haven't met one of the 7 of us, you know. But as I always tell people, I don't mind being the girl with no limbs for like the first time I meet you. But if you're still calling me the girl with no limbs 2 or 3, you know, meetings down the road, I'm going to be like, dude, like, my name is Joanne, you know, like, we're on name basis now. But I think it's, like, I love like doing what I get to do in terms of with sports media and then going into schools, you know, doing the stuff that I do, because it just breaks down the barriers. And I'm very open anyways, because my siblings wouldn't really care. They would say anything in front of me. But I think it's just to be open and have these conversations with kids, you know, with other adults as well, and just to be able to say, look, it's grand, like, you can ask me these questions, as long as I always tell people, like, you can clap for me for jumping a hurdle, that's great, but if you're not helping me remove the hurdle, I don't get the point of the whole thing.
Are we doing enough to remove hurdles?
I think we're gradually getting there. Like, I think we're at a stage now where we've like acknowledged different people exist who want to do the same things as the rest of us. Yeah. I think where we're kind of stuck now is we're not too sure how to go about removing those hurdles as well. And I always say, like, the best thing to do is just ask the person who've encountered these hurdles. You know, I see it in like employment all the time. You know, if I show up at a game, I see stewards freaking out because they're like, oh crap, the press box isn't accessible. Usually the wheelchair area is not in a great place. If it's ladies football, you're lucky to get a spot normally.
Yeah, a stand.
A stand will have to do. There's no Wi-Fi, it's your hotspot. But no, I think it's just, you know, people have to see the hurdles first, you know. Yes. So like, it's not your fault, you know, for not seeing them before you've met me. But I think if it's a situation where I come back the second day and you're still kind of fumbling and all over the place, I'll be like, come on, Richie, like, we just met last week. But no, I think overall, I think it's a learning experience. And I think with accessibility, you can't be afraid of getting it wrong, because chances are someone will come and be like, that doesn't suit me, and that's fine. You know, it's a learning curve for everyone. And I think the idea is, I remember I interviewed Kristen Press of the women's national team, and I remember she said that the game of equality is like a normal football game, only that there's no full time. You have to continue to be your best and show up every day, you know, to have good intentions, to meet with these people, to have these conversations. and be able to put that team plan in action. And if it doesn't work, you go back and you do another team plan, and so on and so forth. And I think that's the most eloquent way I could possibly put it, is that it's constantly going back to the board after it's being like, that plan didn't work, let's go again. Or if you get it lucky, chances are it probably will work.
That's probably the best place to end this chat on such a powerful note.
Yeah.
Listen, thanks a million for coming to chat to us today. Best
Thank
luck
you.
to you both.
Thanks a million.
Thanks.